Hi everyone, I'm Mark, the Programme Manager of Rediscover Cycling in the Rediscovery Centre here in Ballymun, where we do all our bike reconditioning and bike repair. We're continuing our series of giving the bike a really comprehensive check. We're up to step 5, we're going to do step 6 and 7 now. We're going to look at the brakes on the bike. There's a couple of different kinds of brakes around, so we're going to cover a couple of them. And we're going to look at the gears and the chain as well. To start off with, we're going to look at these kinds of brakes. These are called V brakes, when the brake is in two halves on either side of the wheel. And for each of the kinds of brakes, we're going to have a 4-step system for checking them completely, as if, again, that we're building it from scratch. So we're going to check the brake first, then the pads, the cable, and if it's balanced. So we're going to pop it open using its quick release maneuver here, just unlatching it on top so the brake is open. Easier for checking the pads and taking the wheel in and out. We're going to check that the brake is working properly, that it moves in and springs back. This way we know the brake is working properly. It's not going to be an issue going forward. If it was a bit stiff, spraying some lubricant onto the pivot points and working it back and forth can get it going again. But if it's very stiff, you may need to remove it to work on those. Then we're going to have a look at the pads to see if there is plenty of tread left on them. So we've got 2 example pads here. This one here has plenty of tread still on it to capture dirt and water as it's pressing on the rim, so this one has plenty of life still in it. This one here, it's worn unevenly, but certainly in this corner here, it's been worn completely flat. The tread pattern has disappeared. This pad needs to be replaced. If you continue to use a pad like this, there's metal inside the pad that will be exposed and will damage the rim. So you want to check the amount of tread, the amount of rubber left on both pads, and the position of them, that they're hitting the rim at a good point. So this one here, for example, is far too high. It's touching the tire. I would need to loosen it, lower it down. This pad here is much better. It's right in the center of the rim. So after the pads, we would check the cable. So we'll reconnect it. And we're just going to focus on what the lever does. So the lever should pull in and release. And that tells us how the cable is doing. It should pull in to about halfway between the fully open position and the handlebars, parallel with the handlebars themselves. If it needs to be adjusted, it can be adjusted using the barrel adjuster here. The barrel adjuster works kind of counterintuitively. Turning it to the left makes the cable tighter, and turning it to the right makes the cable looser. So it's the opposite of a normal bolt. So if I wanted to tighten the cable, I would turn this to the left. And if I wanted to loosen the cable, I would turn it to the right. So if I turn it to the left quite a lot, for example, my cable gets a lot tighter, doesn't move as much. So I want to loosen it so that the lever comes back halfway between fully open and closed. The last thing we check is the balance. So we look again at the brake and we see how much, I usually look at the very tops of them, see how much they're moving. They should be moving about the same amount. The one to our right isn't moving as much, so we need to adjust it, and to adjust that we can use these small screws on either side down the bottom to put more or less pressure on the springs. So in this case I would screw this one in, this one will get more pressure and it will pull the brake system across to this side. So again, our check for the V brakes, we check the brake itself, the pads, how the cable moves and if it's tight enough, and the balance. And that'll take a little bit of getting used to, especially working with the barrel adjuster can be a new skill, but easy once you know how. if you have caliper brakes, as you would on a racing bike with a thin tire, the order that you check them in is the same, checking the brake, the pads that they have good tread on them, how much the lever is moving, just your barrel adjuster is down on the brake itself rather than at the lever, and your balance is a really small bolt on the top there, will swing the brake side to side a little bit, but the order that we check it in is the same. And the brake will need regular adjustment as the pads wear down as you're using them, which is just natural because they're very fast wearing parts. Just to briefly go over disc brakes. Disc brakes are quite different. So the order we check them in is different. The pads is the first thing we check, although they wear down very slowly. It can be very hard to see, even yourself. We can just pop the wheel out and have a look inside the brake. We won't be able to see it on camera because it's extremely small, but just having a look at the pads to see that there's at least a millimetre or more of the pads still on there. But they are very slow wearing, so won't need to be replaced very often compared to rim brake pads. Then we'll usually check the cable. So it's moving up and then coming back down. The lever is coming back maybe a little bit too much. It's getting a bit too close to the handlebars, but it's snapping back fine, so I'd use the barrel adjuster in this case to make it a bit tighter. If the brake was rubbing the entire time, I might need to move the brake side to side. I can loosen these two bolts here, and I can shift the brake a little bit. It's a difficult enough process, but hopefully if your wheel is in straight, that's the main thing to check first. If the wheel is in straight, it shouldn't be an issue, but once it gets corrected, it should be good for the life of the brake. And then we might need to adjust the pad position with this Allen key here, moving this pad on this side. If the brake was a bit too loose, but tightening it made it rub. So if we use the barrel adjuster and the brake starts rubbing, we'll loosen it and maybe bring this pad in instead to make the brake tighter. They're a little bit more finicky than rim brakes, a different process, but very slow wearing, so they don't need as much of an adjustment. So it's a quick overview of our brakes. There are other kinds of brakes, cantilever and brakes that are in the hub of the wheel. But we'll look now at the chain and the gears. So the chain is like the brakes, is doing a lot of work. It's driving the bike forward the whole time. So it may need to be replaced more often than you think, but it's a lot harder to see when it's worn. So when a chain is worn, the distance between each of the pins has increased slightly, so it no longer sits neatly between the teeth and the gears. A chain checker is a quick and convenient way to estimate how worn a chain is. It has different length sides. On a brand new chain, this won't fit in. Even if I squeeze it, it's not going to fit in the whole way. On a worn chain, that would pop straight in. And then on a slightly longer side, again, it won't fit in on this chain, but on a worn chain, it would fit in, telling us that the chain has worn out. If you don't have a chain checker, it is possible to do with a ruler. If you have a ruler that has inches on it, the distance between each pin should be a 1/2 inch. So if you go to one pin and then jump to 10 inches, it should line up exactly. If it's a little bit ahead of it, the chain is worn. A worn chain will wear the teeth front and back and eventually cause it to skip under pressure when you push hard. So you want to look at the teeth of the gears. They should be fairly round or square, not too, saw some here earlier, not getting too sharp or pointy. It's quite subtle, just on one edge where it pushes on the chain. And it's going to be on the gears you use the most. So you want to have a look at the condition of the chain and the gears. If we look at the gear in the front, if it comes off very easily, this one comes forward a little bit but not too much. If it's very loose on there, the chain will be quite worn. But the chain mainly needs to be kept clean and oiled. They're difficult things to clean. If you have a dedicated paintbrush or sponge for running it through, you can pass it through it, or you can invest in a chain cleaner that will enclose the chain, and you can fill it with solvent or soap to clean the chain. For oiling the chain, if you have the patience, 1 drop on each link is the best way to do it. That way you're checking each link individually for damage, but a stream of oil and passing the chain through it is better than nothing. It doesn't need too much, just needs a light oiling. You can wipe off the excess, because excess oil will just attract dirt. But it's up there with pumping your tires regularly. It needs to be done regularly enough, especially if there's a lot of rain, or it's just been a while since you've oiled it last. So that's our brakes and our chain and our gears. In our next video, we're going to finish off the checking how the gears are shifting, checking our accessories, and doing one last scan over the bike in total to see if there's anything we missed. So that'll be in our last video. I'll see you now.